Newsroom?
Jeanine Cunningham.
So how'd you get involved in all of this?
My father was one of the potential victims from Harvard.
Was my mom's skin made into buttons?
This is like shades of a horror movie.
Just when I think I've seen everything, bam.
It's the most bizarre case I've ever been associated with.
I don't believe that there's a system in place where an individual can say, I would like my body to become a decorative piece.
Do you have anything to say about the charges that you're facing right now? Candace Chapman Scott is accused of selling stolen body parts that belong to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences.
Prosecutors outlining a nationwide network of people buying and selling human remains stolen from Harvard Medical School.
They said we confiscated five 5-gallon buckets of body parts.
Criminals were apparently, walking through the morgue like it was a flea market. It's disgusting.
And so now I have to constantly think, is my mom's head on someone's mantle? He's destroyed me, absolutely destroyed me.
In certain circumstances, it's legal.
In the U.S., there's no federal regulation.
So my particular business, we do mostly human bones.
Pauley has been in the business of buying and selling oddities on Facebook for years.
It's the same thing as a drug dealer on the street.
There's a hidden market of things that I wouldn't have expected there to be.
What are you doing with body parts?
We're going to have to wait and see. There might be more to this story.
This story starts at the point where life ends. When you die, you might be buried, or you could choose to have your ashes scattered in your favorite place. But some people choose to give themselves so they can teach another.
This donor is your first patient.
Every year in the United States, about 20,000 people donate their bodies to science. Anatomical gift programs teach our future surgeons, physicians, and dentists.
We are primarily using the donor to understand every aspect of their anatomy.
Everyone is slightly different. If you had only studied one skeleton your entire career, you would have an inadequate understanding of the skeletal system.
Not only educate students, but keep them mindful of the humanity of the person that they're working with.
When students are finished learning, donors are cremated and could be returned to their families, or buried in a garden, or their ashes could be kept in a vault. Always, they can rest in peace.
She was really looking forward to the advancement of science.
But even with a gift intended for good, in some cases, there's a dark side, exploiting the dead.
I mean, this doesn't really sound like it could be real.
Federal prosecutors outlining a nationwide network of people buying and selling human remains stolen from Harvard Medical School and an Arkansas mortuary.
Jeremy Pauley here, facing some new charges along with 5 others for trafficking human remains.
It's rooted in an industry of intrigue. But what happens when that fascination goes too far?
And I feel almost guilty in a way that I couldn't protect her.
In the shadows of Pennsylvania's state capitol, across the street from this cemetery.
A Cumberland County man is facing charges tonight, accused of buying human body parts on Facebook Messenger. Police say they were told by Pauley that he was, quote, a collector of oddities.
A collector of oddities, or a lead preservation specialist of retired medical specimens, as he describes himself on his website. Jeremy Pauley has been in the business of body parts.
This man is like a wholesaler.
There was brains, there was livers, there was hearts, skulls, skin, human skin, you name it.
He was turning his Facebook posts into profits.
East Pennsboro Police contacted us and said, hey, we have this situation. We have this guy that seems to be selling stuff on Facebook. Looks like body parts. Is this illegal?
Dedicated to selling the dead, the oddities industry is largely legal across the United States.
Behind me, I have a bunch of medical skeletons. This is actually one of the rarest skulls in the Johns Bones collection. Here we have some real human ribs, but what is this yellow stuff inside of it?
The world of oddities is a world of wonder to some, with social media posts, websites, expos, and even museums.
The oddities industry is a large umbrella term. It encapsulates so many different talented artists and working professionals Oftentimes, oddities can be seen as antique medical tools, bones, skeletons, taxidermy, and a variety of other interesting and unique items.
Personally, I think that the oddities world it's fascinating. Why is it fascinating? Because it's something different.
We do a lot of weird stuff, the odd, the macabre. It's very niche. You've got your customer base, you have your just a variety of collectors, everything from high school students, college, to medical, to teachers, to just somebody that wants to put it on their shelf next to an old book.
It's an industry of intrigue that draws people in.
For a lot of people, to collect a human skull, it's like a holy grail for them. Like this one came out of an estate sale from a dentist's office.
At just 13, what started with a mouse skeleton fueled John Picciaferri's interest in osteology. He's now the owner of John's Bones.
I think it's the history and it's the untold history.
For Jason Hack, the owner of Bones by Design, his interest came after a battle with bone cancer.
That's what really started the drive for it for me.
From Facebook to websites and in almost every corner of the internet, you'll find a supply of skeletons.
You see it online all the time. If you look for it, if you look in the right places, you can find it.
So where there is lack of enforcement or where there is lack of oversight or where there is simply just so much volume happening that no machine could really keep tabs on everything, that's where you will find trades such as this.
People will feel it's somewhat creepy to be selling body parts on either Facebook or anything online or in anywhere. But there's nothing illegal about it as long as it's bought from a reliable source and a source who's able to sell them.
While anyone can buy, many of the people who do are medical professionals.
In fact, we have boxes of bones that were bought in the 70s.
Skulls, skeletons, and bones can all go for thousands of dollars.
This particular skull is worth about $2,300.
It just really depends on the quality. A demonstrative skull can go anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. An entire medical skeleton can sell from anywhere between $6,000 to $8,000.
Is this a lucrative business?
It really just depends. I always say there's a million easier ways to make money in New York City than selling skulls for a living. So we do this because it's a passion of mine, and I think someone really needs to shepherd this conversation.
But for Jeremy Pauley, a self-proclaimed curator,
we did find out as part of the initial investigation that maybe there are some things that are occurring that are legal and there's no crime going on. But as the course of the investigation continued, that's when we began to discover that there was something more to it.
And then this is a good picture. Her and the Christmas tree. That was our tree. Like, they would always be huge.
With a walk down memory lane, Donna Pratt comes to life.
My mother, absolutely phenomenal person. She was amazing. She was my best friend. We did absolutely everything together, and she taught me so much about life in general.
What were some of those life experiences that you hold near and dear?
Oh my gosh, definitely one of them is the love for cars, I have to say that. She taught me since I was a kid about cars, and she grew up with, it was her uncle that owned a mechanic's garage, and so she learned a lot of her life skills with cars through that, and then she raced cars when she was younger.
Pieces of who Donna was.
We would go to Star Speedway in Epping, New Hampshire, or New England Dragway in Epping, New Hampshire, and I really, really enjoyed doing that with her. She was all about it. She was just about life. She loved life.
And now your cat's even named Turbo.
Yeah, he is.
But for Donna, at 71 years old, the race was over. Her diagnosis, stage 4 lung cancer.
And she fought and fought and fought and never gave up until when it came down to the day.
As Donna's health declined, Amber stepped up to take care of her mom, just as her mom had taken care of her for years.
That was one way of me to repay her was, Mom, I'm going to take care of you now. And she was fighting through everything. She was like, I'll do whatever I can. What can I do to survive? And then ultimately it took her over. But when it came to her last day, I randomly just woke up in the middle of the night. I was at a dead sleep. I was 4 months pregnant. And I woke up and I looked over at my mom, and her breathing was really off. And I stood up and I put my hand on her and I looked at her face and I said, "Mom." She stopped breathing right then and there. And that's been like the hardest day of my life, was the day of losing her.
Gone, but never forgotten. Amber named her child after Donna, giving her a piece of her mom she could hold close.
Owen Don, D-O-N for short.
Why did you choose to give him that name?
Because my mom's so special to me. And I wanted to keep her memory alive.
But even in death, Donna had one more request.
She donated herself, which was so selfless.
She wanted to head to Harvard to be donated to their anatomical gift program.
Why Harvard?
Because my mom didn't graduate high school. Honestly, she was like, "You know what, Amber?" She was like, "That'd be a great goal in my life, is to go straight to Harvard." They're completely trusted, right? It's the #1 school. So did we think.
This man, accused of trying to get stolen human body parts from a woman in Arkansas over Facebook.
In the summer of 2022, a bone-chilling enterprise started unraveling.
Court documents show during a police visit in June, Pauley told officials his collection of bones and organs were purchased through legal means.
But when Pauley's estranged wife tipped off East Pennsboro police in Pennsylvania, his business plan was busted.
Police say he had multiple 5-gallon buckets filled with human remains.
I was a police officer for 26 years and processed crime scenes for the majority of that career, and I've never come across this.
Charlie Hall is now the Cumberland County coroner and has been for the past decade.
We had our forensic pathologists examine them, and they were definitely human remains.
According to court documents, he had human brains, a heart, kidney, spleen, lungs, and skin, all in his home in Enola. He's also accused of paying $4,000 to a woman in Arkansas for other human remains, including half of a head, a heart, a liver, and a lung, along with 2 kidneys, 4 hands, and a full female pelvis.
Whoa, spine is selling what?
It just makes me wonder, what are people doing?
Now I know what this guy was doing with them. I mean, he was making things out of them. He was drying the skin and making wallets and book covers and everything else weird.
Post after post, Jeremy Pauley was selling human remains on Facebook. These photos from his personal page.
And he belonged to a group called Oddities Marketplace on Facebook.
Partaking in a world of spooky shopping, he was also buying body parts from Candace Chapman Scott.
A spokesperson for the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences in Little Rock confirms the remains were donated to its medical program.
Candace Chapman Scott worked at a mortuary in Arkansas, which partnered with the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Court documents say her job was to embalm, transport, and cremate donated cadavers so they could be returned to their loved ones or buried in the UAMS cremation garden.
Instead of cremating the cadavers the university used for educational purposes, Scott's accused of shipping them to Pennsylvania for a profit.
We found out about this from the FBI, and we were just really very, very saddened and appalled that this would happen because, as I mentioned, we really are beholden to these people who give of themselves, really literally. We really consider them heroes.
Court documents say police were able to piece together the sales through a string of Facebook messages.
I follow your page and work and love it. I'm a mortician and work at a trade service mortuary. So we are contracted through the medical hospital here in Little Rock to cremate their cadavers when the medical students are done with them before they discard them in the cremation garden. Just out of curiosity, would you know anyone in the market for a full intact embalmed brain? I actually just looked and I have 2 embalmed with skull cap.
Jeremy Pauley then responded, and they set a price of $1,200.
You are literally on the same page because that was going to be my offer, LOL.
Transactions like that happening again and again and again. Court documents say every time new cadavers came into the mortuary to be cremated, parts of people's bodies were harvested and sold through Facebook. From October of 2021 to July of 2022, There were at least 15 transactions between Pauley and Scott, selling everything, including the corpses of 2 stillborn babies. Babies who were supposed to be cremated and reunited with their families.
I certainly was unaware of an industry like this, as were the other folks here at UAMS. And, you know, we just take the greatest care of these folks when they're here with us.
Those court documents say Scott profited more than $10,000. Pauley also profiting, reselling those parts for his own gain.
How easy or difficult would it be for someone in a mortuary service to steal some of these body parts?
It'd probably be relatively easy, I would think. Unless she's got thorough supervision, it'd be very easy to do.
Nothing like this has ever happened before, and certainly we are always reevaluating processes and procedures, and we will continue to do that. But what happened did not happen here at UAMS. We also understand that the mortuary that was involved, they immediately fired the person, and they cooperated fully with the FBI as well.
At its core, this case is a stolen property case.
Both of them arrested. Scott charged with mail fraud, wire fraud, and interstate transportation of stolen property. Pauley charged with abuse of a corpse, receiving stolen property, and dealing in unlawful activities.
They charged a guy with, abuse of a corpse and receiving stolen property because that's all they could really do.
It's really hard to know that you didn't get someone's, one part back when you send a body to be cremated.
She's probably not the only person he's buying from.
With ripples in the water on a windy day, it's like Marshall Gelada is still fishing.
He was a real hard worker, blue collar. He multiple different jobs here or there, but fishing was always his priority. He was a commercial fisherman. He fished lobsters, tuna fish, that kind of stuff.
If you could describe his personality or who he was, what would you say?
He was kind of a gruff, kind of typical old Yankee kind of thing, but he had kind of a big heart, He would really never show you, but he really did.
What did he mean to you, you being his daughter?
I was the oldest of 5. His kids were rather important to him. He really struggled to make sure that we were taken care of, fed, We never wanted for, food or a roof over our head or anything like that. He was a very strong provider.
All of these memories, important pieces of who Marshall Gelada was.
Sounds like you have a lot of love for your dad.
Yeah. That's one thing that family we did not want for, we really were loved.
Which is why when Marshall Gelada said he wanted to be donated to science, Jeanine Cunningham did the research and made it happen. He later died from cancer.
He was a Korean Navy vet. When he got out of the Navy, he had gone to school and he worked as a licensed practical nurse. I don't know if that was part of it but anyway, he always said, that's what I want to do.
Why Harvard?
Well, here we are, 35 miles north of Boston. Harvard's a premier medical school. Who doesn't want to get, go to school at Harvard? It was important to him, that he go to a reputable place. And then he proceeded to run around and tell everybody how he'd be the first in his family to go to Harvard, so it became a joke, actually, he was going to Harvard.
He said he even told his physician?
The physician would say, how you doing, and he'd say, I'm not at Harvard yet, so, it really became kind of a joke in some ways, so. But he was quite proud of it. He really was.
What would you want to tell your dad?
Sorry. Didn't expect that one. I kind of feel bad about that because I kind of found Harvard. I brought it to him. So I guess I'd say I was sorry that this happened. You know, he did it for the right reasons. He really did do it for the right reasons, but it didn't work out that way.
Dear Miss Hagstrom, our records list you as the next of kin for Donna Pratt.
A moment she'll never forget, and words that only bring worry.
I am profoundly saddened to report that today the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Pennsylvania announced the indictment and arrest of Cedric Lodge, a former HMS employee, for the unlawful interstate transport of stolen human remains.
It's a situation she never saw coming. How could she?
I have a lot of anger, because this should have never ever happened.
Not far from Fenway Park and the Charles River, it's a symbol of prestige, and it's the last place you'd ever expect this kind of scandal.
I feel like everything that has happened with this Harvard situation killed my mom all over again. It's like losing my mom twice.
While hundreds of students spent time studying, a staff member with secrets was lurking in the halls.
I think I first found out when I saw evening news one night, and I kind of was like, what? So I called, and she informed me that, yes, his name was on the list as a potential victim.
Lodge is accused of allowing people to enter the morgue to choose what to purchase and what remains they wanted. The remains were sold to people in multiple states, including Jeremy Pauley in Pennsylvania.
We were like, it's Harvard. How could that happen at Harvard?
In June of 2023, the Department of Justice charging 6 people with trafficking stolen human remains. The DOJ saying this went on for years, from 2018 to 2022. On the list of indictments, Cedric Lodge, the former morgue manager for the Anatomical Gifts program at Harvard Medical School, his wife Denise Lodge, Katrina McLean, who owned Cat's Creepy Creations in Peabody, Massachusetts, Joshua Taylor, and Matthew Lampy.
We're talking things including heads, brains, skin, and bones, as well as other parts of cadavers that had been donated and were supposed to be cremated.
Even dissected faces.
Pauley is facing charges related to a multi-state scheme of buying and selling stolen human remains.
And Jeremy Pauley is still at the center of it all, facing charges already. Court documents say he started talking, giving investigators information about the network of dealers. Pauley was charged again, this time with a federal crime. The network now spanning multiple states, from Pennsylvania and Arkansas, now to New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Minnesota.
It was a bigger thing than I ever thought that it would have been.
Court documents say Cedric Lodge took body parts back to his home in New Hampshire, selling them online, then shipping them across state lines. Those involved accused of reselling them, either in a store like Cat's Creepy Creations or to people like Jeremy Pauley.
What is a store for? For things to be sold. So now those items are now sold. They're gone. There's going to be probably no trace of them now. They're out there somewhere, and that's one thing that always lingers in my mind. Did that happen? Is my mom's body parts in another state way somewhere else or in another country? I have no idea.
Court documents say Katrina McLean shipped human skin to Jeremy Pauley, using his services to tan the skin, creating leather. After one of the shipments, court docs say McLean reached out to Pauley, asking if it arrived, saying,
"I want to make sure it got to you, and I don't expect agents at my door."
The price of these parts is hefty. Court documents say PayPal transactions showed Joshua Taylor spent almost $40,000. One of those transactions with the memo? Brains. Everyone involved profiting. The DOJ says Lampy and Pauley bought and sold from each other for an extended period of time and exchanged more than $100,000 in online payments.
It's absolutely horrible, and it's all for pleasure and profit. He could have cared less about the families involved and about the person that was donated.
In a letter, Harvard says it's an abhorrent betrayal, and they say the morgue manager was fired May 6th.
We have been working with information supplied by federal authorities in examining our records, particularly the logs showing when donor remains were sent to be cremated and when Lodge was on campus to try to determine which donors may have been impacted.
Harvard Medical School sent a letter to Jeanine Cunningham saying they couldn't rule out the potential her dad's remains were involved.
Did they give you any information about why they thought that your father could have been impacted?
Yes, they told me that they looked at the morgue attendant's work records, and they felt that his time there aligned with the employee's time. And so that was the potential for where all of that would have happened, was when he was on duty.
But Amber Hagstrom received a letter with a slightly different wording, saying, quote, they don't believe Donna Pratt's remains were impacted, but they're still investigating and will be in touch.
So I don't trust this 100% at all. And there has been too much that has came to light with how many families that have been impacted. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And can I trust anything? Absolutely not.
The DOJ says they've been contacted by 246 potential victims. In a press release, they said Harvard Medical School is also a victim.
This is going on for 4 years, unnoticed, of human remains going out of Harvard Medical School. That's disgusting. And so now I have to constantly think, is my mom's head on someone's mantle? Was my mom's skin made into buttons?
I mean, they've literally sentenced us to a lifetime of uncertainty, of never knowing.
This is an original Clay Adams medical catalog.
A catalog of corpses.
A real child skull is $60. That same piece today can sell from anywhere from between $3,000 to $5,000.
John Picciaferri, the owner of John's Bones, says decades ago, for many medical students, buying bones was on their school supply list.
This one is from the company Adam Ruley, based in the UK, and it dates from between 1918 to 1920.
With many med schools now doing it differently.
These were popularized by dentists, where you can actually see the bisected mandible.
These decades-old retired medical specimens of all kind have a new home in the Bone Museum in Brooklyn, New York, a museum also run by John Picciaferri.
The spine wall is really the centerpiece of the museum. So with such a large collection, it really allows for medical students to really see the breadth of the human body.
Unlike Pauley,
I was shocked. I found out with the rest of America, there was a clear breach of trust.
Ferry is selling legally, a business model that's above board.
It used to be standardized for doctors and institutions to buy these human remains. Fast forward over 100 years, all of these doctors and anatomists are either retiring or passing away, and people don't know what to do with the bones.
And so what is your answer to that problem?
We look at the original intentionality of these pieces for education and understanding. So we purchase these pieces back from the general public and we sell them to educators and working professionals, as well as we work to raise awareness about what happened in this trade.
He says there could be anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 skulls circulating all around the U.S. right now. With the exact number hard to pin down, he says one thing is for certain. There's a surplus of skulls.
You know, most commonly we hear, oh, just bury them, put them to rest. But unfortunately, improper disposal of human remains is illegal. Then people say repatriate them, which is the process of returning remains to specific indigenous groups or surviving relatives of the individual. But unfortunately, how they were cleaned, they cannot be DNA tested. And the last people say is donate them. Unfortunately, in the majority of medical museums, does not have a large enough team to handle this amount of remains. So now we're stuck with a perpetual object that can't be destroyed, can't be returned, and can't be donated. Everything that you see within the museum space, as well as the John's Bones collection, comes from retired doctors, anatomists, or universities once they sell off their medical collections.
And how do you ensure that the bones that you're getting are sourced through these medical collections and they weren't stolen property or they didn't come from somewhere else?
We do our best to ensure that these pieces are medical by looking at how they were prepared. Oftentimes, skulls will come with a calvarium cut or what we call jewelry, which is the hinges and the latches that show that it is a medical preparation.
Do you think it's ethical?
I think it is ethical. I think that somebody needs to be able to have this conversation and discourse. We found a lot of paperwork where if the individual was ill, the family members would donate their bodies. So it was all done legally. It was all done with paperwork and permission.
How do you know that they consented?
We look at historical research and archival documents. We have newspaper clippings as well as consent forms from various companies, but due to Anatomical Gifts Acts and the laws in place, it would be illegal for the company to source the remains without proper consent. Unfortunately, in any industry, when money and profiteering becomes involved, could there have been instances of signatures being forged? Could there be instances of families being pressured into donating due to financial troubles? We absolutely believe this could have happened and have happened within the industry, but primarily it was illegal to source remains if it wasn't consented.
And you said you don't sell to just your average Joe, you only sell to people in the medical or educational professions, correct?
That is exactly correct. We've always said these pieces are not decoration, these pieces are not a vanity, these are real human remains and they should be treated with respect and dignity. So we want them to go back to educators and working professionals that can benefit and use it for science and learning. We try to treat these pieces with as much respect and dignity as possible, as if they were a loved one of our own.
But human remains, while legal, are a controversial commodity.
I think it comes down to the person who has donated, are they okay with someone having that skull?
By and large, when you look into the history of those collections and those remains, we're not sourced ethically in the first place. We don't trade living humans. We shouldn't trade dead ones either.
Dead people can't consent, right? So the areas where those consent is possible may be so narrow that it's still better to just make it illegal.
If it goes into a physician's hands, it's typically because they are teaching that material and they need a specimen to teach that material. Would I like my skull to be sitting on some random weirdo's mantle? Absolutely not.
If you're going to just hack someone up and sell them for pleasure and profit, that's wrong. But from a medical standpoint, absolutely, that's okay, as long as there is and has been full consent.
Ethics are all in the eye of the beholder on anything. I wouldn't do it if I wouldn't feel that it was ethical for me to buy or sell them.
If people are willing to shepherd it and take care of these pieces in a respectful and insightful manner, I think it's better than them ending up in the trash.
The interstate body part buying scheme continues. This time it goes all the way to Kentucky.
Just when you think there can't be more, there is. Jeremy Pauley once again leading investigators to another suspect. The interstate network of illegal body part buying getting bigger and bigger, leading to a man who told police he was in his home with, quote, my dead friends. That man, James Knott.
Authorities say he had 40 skulls in his home. At the center once again, a Cumberland County man who's accused of selling stolen parts.
Court docs say in a search of Pauley's Facebook page, they came across a profile for William Burke. William Burke was James Knott, and he'd been talking to Pauley.
These will be here soon, not claimed yet.
Yeah, some of those prices are garbage out there. I don't mind paying up for a little shop stock. Make things look good.
On July 11th, 2023, the FBI raided Knott's house, finding spinal cords, femurs, hip bones, and skulls used as decoration around furniture. One wrapped in a headscarf, and another on the bed where Knott slept. Agents also finding a bag from Harvard Medical School. And with his hand over his heart, Knott was arrested for having a firearm when he shouldn't have had one, a charge he's pled guilty to. But in his case, there wasn't a single charge related to body parts.
Jeremy Pauley, I'm with CBS 21. Do you have anything to say about the charges that you're facing right now?
On September 7th, 2023, Pauley appeared in federal court, facing his fate in front of a judge.
Why did you decide to sell stolen human remains? Anything to say to the families of the loved ones whose remains those were?
Pauley dodging all of our questions before he took a plea deal, pleading guilty to charges related to interstate transportation of stolen property.
With his guilty plea, Jeremy Pauley could be facing a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison and a fine of $500,000. That will be decided by a judge in the coming months, but in the meantime, Pauley's attorney says he's taken accountability for his actions. Pauley's attorney off camera telling me more information will come out at sentencing that will show a fuller picture of the situation. He also says people make poor choices, but it doesn't define them, and Pauley is taking responsibility.
There's nothing I can say. There's nothing they can do or give us or anything to make it right. There really isn't.
You destroyed my life. You completely destroyed my mother's dignity. And I'm completely disgusted.
Both Amber and Jeanine wrote victim impact statements in Pauley's case, describing their grief, pain, and the uncertainty this has caused them.
Because it's important for him to know the impact that it has happened, how he has affected me and for the rest of my life. This is not a temporary situation. And I pray to God that he never ever buys anything from anyone ever again, because he is going to hurt another family.
Do you think with his guilty plea there's justice?
No. I still don't have my mom. At least he did plead guilty, but it doesn't put me at ease.
Pauley has yet to be sentenced on his federal charges. He's also pleaded guilty to charges in Cumberland County of misdemeanor abuse of a corpse. Felony counts of receiving stolen property were dismissed. He'll be sentenced in March of 2024 for the Pennsylvania charges. Neither Pauley nor his attorney would do an interview. Candace Chapman Scott, Cedric Lodge, and others who've been charged also have court dates set for 2024. None of them, or their attorneys, would talk to us either.
I ended up getting my mother's ashes back in March of 2022. And that day brought me peace. I got my mom back for about a little over a year. I felt like my life was getting back on track. And then June of 2023 hit. Every stage of grief came back times 10.
After students at Harvard Medical School finished their studies with Donna Pratt, she was cremated and sent back to Amber. But her safe haven has now turned to a sunken feeling.
I don't have the connection with the ashes like I used to. And I had a connection when I first brought her home. Every morning, I would have her on my fridge to keep her protected from my kids. I'm like, if I put her on a mantle or something, God forbid, my kids are like bouncing a ball off the walls and my mom goes flying and now she's all over the couch. I'm like, I can't have that happen. So I have her on my fridge with her cocoa. She drank cocoa all the time. That was her favorite. But when I got her back, and I would say, good morning, Mom, and tell her, just about what I'm going to do that day. And then nighttime would roll around, good night, Mom. That's something we would do every day. It made me feel like she was still here, like she was still with me. And then now when this happened, I dwindled away from the ashes. I don't find myself saying good morning, Mom. I don't find myself saying good night, Mom. And that's hard. I kept to the ashes. I didn't bury her because I needed her with me. I pray to God that some of it could possibly be her. But the problem is that I'll never know. She was my everything, my absolute everything, and I couldn't protect her. I'm sorry.
It's a question on Jeanine Cunningham's mind, too.
He wanted his ashes intact so that they could commingled with my mother so that they could go together. So we tried to honor that, but we feel really bad that we might not have been able to, and it's it's nothing we did. It's something that happened that we had no control over, and keeping his wish was taken away from us.
How does that make you feel?
Sad, really, and upset. It's makes you feel a little bit of a failure because you couldn't do what you promised him you'd do, and that's not any of our fault.
What would he say about all of this?
Oh, I can't even imagine. I don't think he'd be really happy about it. Although we used to joke about all the adventures and the things he'd get himself into, but, you know, I can't imagine this would be anything he would have ever dreamed or thought of. And I don't think, he is such an old Yankee. I don't think he'd be happy about it. I can hear him grumbling, that's for sure.
These questions will linger in my mind forever. Mom, where are you? What do I have in my home?
Fighting for change, Amber and Jeanine are now on a mission pushing for answers to make sure this doesn't happen again. They've joined a class action lawsuit against Harvard Medical School. They're part of just one of the 12 lawsuits.
What system failures were in place that allowed for this to happen, and how can we change that?
My mother does not have a voice anymore, so I now need to be her voice.
That's why they enlisted the help of attorney Catherine Barnett.
I think it's super important to hold Harvard accountable.
She has a resume for these types of cases.
Breaking news to tell you about in a civil suit filed against Ray Brent Marsh. Today, the Tennessee Supreme Court upheld a verdict against the tri-state crematory operator. Authorities found 339 bodies at the Marsh family property in Noble back in 2002.
It was a long, hard-fought litigation.
She's just one of the attorneys now suing Harvard Medical School.
We are seeking money damages for sure, but that's probably the least of what we're interested in. We really want to see systemic change. At Harvard, we want to see every medical school around the country who's accepting and asking for this kind of gift to look at their policies and procedures.
Of the remains that have been recovered, Catherine Barnett says they also want to test them to figure out who they are, something that was able to be done in the tri-state crematory case. Through the civil suit, Catherine Barnett says they're trying to get to the bottom of what Harvard Medical School's anatomical gift program's policies were and how years of harvesting cadavers for profit happened.
We also know Cedric Lodge worked there for decades before that time period, and so I have a lot of questions.
After the charges were filed in June, Harvard Medical School initiated an independent review of its anatomical gift program. In its report, the outside panel made a number of recommendations, including a further review of security processes, more technical oversight, and additional background checks and training for anatomical gift program employees.
I need to figure out exactly what happened, what went wrong here, and I hope to be at peace someday.
I want to make sure that what they've changed is significant and will not allow anything like that to happen again.
Arthur and Elizabeth Rathburn used to run a company that rented out body parts for medical training to big cities, including Detroit. The bodies were originally donated for science, but documents show the couple bought deceased bodies for cheap and then lied about it to their customers.
Headline after headline, showing us these cases aren't a one-off.
It's a little bit soul-crushing for those who want to do this, and now they fear it.
Many of those headlines involving people looking for a payday, making a buck off someone else's body. So what divides the criminal and legal side of the business?
The legal field is very murky.
It all comes down to the laws largely allowing people to buy and sell human remains, unless they're stolen or Native American.
Lack of legislation doesn't necessarily make something ethical or moral. Human remains are in this nebulous gray zone.
In the US, there's no federal regulation against the ownership, sale, and possession of human osteology.
Aside from the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, a law ensuring Native American remains and cultural objects find their way back to descendants and tribes.
So it's all different state by state. So there's a couple of we call them no-no states: Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana.
Louisiana is the only state that outright bans human osteology or human bones. Tennessee and Georgia, you are able to possess and purchase it, but they cannot leave and come out of state lines.
Other states like Florida, Massachusetts, Missouri, Texas, and Virginia also have laws on the books, making it illegal to sell human remains. But many other states, like Pennsylvania, don't, putting people at the mercy of patchwork state laws.
The human laws are pretty lax.
It allows for people to buy and sell human bones. This is because broadly, think about ashes. Ashes are considered bone and are considered human remains. So then criminalizing or changing legislation about it can quickly make so many people break the law.
While many states do have laws preventing people from robbing graves or mistreating remains, Remember, many of the body parts being sold legally are sourced from medical collections and doctors.
Do you think there needs to be more legislation in place, or things need to change after what we saw in the Jeremy Pauley case?
I think there needs to be more public awareness with it, but also harsher regulations and sentencings for people that knowingly break the law.
Seems like, an industry with a lot of possibility for misuse and bad actors. That suggests that it should be more clearly regulated.
I think the way it's regulated now is completely fine as long as everybody's doing up and up.
More regulations, more legislation, I just don't think that kind of stuff should be able to be sold.
What's your message to lawmakers?
Oh my gosh. Please make a change. Make a change so that we don't have to have all these families keep suffering.
We need to change and look at legislation, and not just state to state, but maybe even federal legislation that covers all of it. This can't happen to somebody else. It can't.
While Congress is considering new legislation, it's yet to go up for a vote or leave committee. In the meantime, when people like Donna Pratt or Marshall donate their bodies to science, there is the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, where each state sets guidelines for how donations should be handled.
So in Pennsylvania, the way the laws are set up, they're all governed by the Humanity Gifts Registry. So we all follow the same policies. If that donor has designated their donation to a specific institution, we honor those wishes.
Penn State is one of the institutions that receives those donations.
We actually use two different mantras, if you will. One of which is dissect with respect. The cadaver is your best teacher. All of that comes into play every step of the process.
Every year, Penn State holds a ceremony honoring those who donated themselves as a way to say thank you for the sacrifice.
Being able to hear their stories and what they have to say and remember about their loved ones is a really unique connection and will stay in my heart forever.
We couldn't do our jobs and learn in the way that we do without this gracious, donation.
The biggest takeaway is how impactful one person can be.
My goal is to create an anatomy experience which is not just this is a body, these are the parts, but they need to understand the process. They need to understand that this is a real person.
Sitting down with Evan Goldman, the director of Penn State's Anatomical Gift Program, he says they're meticulous for making sure every part of a person is kept together and treated appropriately.
This is one person and everything should stay together. It will ultimately be cremated all together.
What type of security or supervision is in place to make sure that these bodies stay in their entirety and someone doesn't take advantage of the system?
We can drop right back to the first line of defense, which is respect. I know that that's not a security system, but it is. If people respect their world, they're not going to steal from it.
For physical safety precautions,
we don't allow backpacks or anything like that in the lab, so I'm not sure you want to put a liver underneath your coat and walk out with it. That would be awkward at best. There are cameras out in the hall. We have a lockdown system, right? Everything's it's card swiped. Now to take it back to our morgue, because I recognize that that's what happened at Harvard, but that's what happened at Harvard. That does not mean that's what's happened at other institutions.
Has what happened at Harvard caused you to take a look at your policies or review them again?
Of course.
Goldman says they have a no unauthorized visitor policy, which applies to their labs, morgue, and their whole building. He says when the staff steps out of the morgue or crematory, the doors are immediately locked. They monitor what goes in and out of the crematory and communicate constantly with their team. He said while there were no major policy changes after Cedric Lodge's indictment, he says they regularly examine the way they operate.
It's unfortunate that there's no absolute security to prevent someone from doing what happened in Harvard, other than to say that the procedures in place make it unlikely that an individual can get away with doing something like this.
How do you feel knowing you may never get the answers of if your mom's body parts were taken?
Pure devastation. Pure devastation.
Does it bring you any comfort knowing that his life was able to help educate someone?
I'd like to think it did, definitely. Being in the medical field myself, I feel that it's important. I thought it was, a very generous, probably the most generous thing you could do.
I think the first most important thing is, this is an isolated incident and it shouldn't be representative of the broader educational market. Unfortunately, I think it sets a negative precedent for individuals that are trying to do it ethically and legally. I think primarily at the heart of this, I feel extreme sorrow for the families affected by this.
Would you ever donate your body to science?
Would I? You know what? I have questioned that. I've thought about it. And I wanted to. I wanted to be just like my mom and do what she did. I'm hoping that one day I can get my mind into a better place.
I don't think I would at this point, I'll be honest. I know my brother was going to, and he's rethinking it as well.
So I absolutely still advocate for body donation and public education. Hopefully one day I can end up in the museum next to my cat Chunk.
I think it's one of the best things you could possibly do. If they are still concerned and they're saying, I just can't bring myself to donate, my response is, then please don't donate. And it's not a negative thing whatsoever. I do not want any family members to do something that they wouldn't want to do.
Don't let the few misguided individuals prevent you from doing something that will benefit, in our case, hundreds of future healthcare workers.
But if you're thinking about it, I encourage you to reach out, talk to somebody about it, talk to your family about it, talk to your loved one about it. Being able to have that impact, if that's something that you're interested in doing, this is an amazing way to do that, and the impact will go on for generations.
For Amber and Jeanine,
what do you want to tell your mom?
I miss her. I miss her a lot. And I hope she's proud of me. I hope she's proud of me for doing what I'm doing right now for her and for everyone else. And I hope that another family doesn't go through this pain ever again. That's horrible. My mom didn't deserve this.
This can't happen to somebody else. It can't. This never should have happened to begin with. So, in all honesty, we need to make sure it never does happen to anybody else again.
but even if change does happen, there's an uncertainty they'll feel forever.
Our families were not throwaways. My mother was not a throwaway. She was supposed to be home with me and in my hands. But instead, now I don't know where she is.
It's really caused a lot of distress because we may never know.